Well, hello everybody, I'm LA Little. This is your daily NeoTA wrap. Take a look at these markets. We do it from a neoclassical perspective. What does that mean? That means we look at these markets each and every day. We ask ourselves what happened today? What does it tell us about the coming ones? The market proves itself over and over. It either verifies some sort of a condition that you set, some test that you set, based on some area of significance, or it fails. Either way, it tells you something. You just have to know where to set those tests and observe them. Do the show 4 times a week, Monday through Thursday, broadcast at or before 10 o'clock Eastern Time, archived on YouTube. It's available under the channel LA Little. As far as today and what happened, we kind of got a continuation move to the upside. We're getting the laggards starting to run higher now. So the ones that were running, which is the S&P and the Dow, right? They slow down, and the guys that are trying to catch up start speeding up. Why is that? Well, because these haven't got back to the highs yet, whereas these are already at the highs. So what do? You see rotation. You see the money go into quote unquote the cheaper stocks, and that's kind of what's happening. Elsewhere, gold flat. We had bonds down again today. Remember, they had a big spike up on Friday. Today, they take away a good chunk of that, down 1.6%. Dollar was up pretty big, almost a full percent. And that probably was that, and the bonds were the big story again today, because in the equities, you really didn't have much happening. If you look at the S&P 500, it pulled up, got over the swing point high, so now you have a breakout. Tomorrow this will be an arrow here, and it will show red because it's suspect. So you go higher, you get the breakout, you get the higher spin. This ABCD structure, let me see, 2068 roughly to 20, well, call it 67, that would be 40 points. So it's about 41 points. Add that onto the bottom of this. That gets you to 2026. So we're there, right? We've already done the ABCD structure. So we'll see if it wants to try to continue or not, if that's it or not. My guess here is we're about as far as we're going to go. We're probably going to get a pullback. What do I base that on? I go over to the Dow, and the Dow actually failed. It didn't really quote unquote fail. You got over back under the big bar. So it looks to me like the Dow is going to try to come back. 18,288 was that swing point high over there. We got to 18,325. We closed at 98. So you're over the swing point high. This also will get an arrow tomorrow showing trend transition. But you got over this bar, back under it, you have less volume. I suspect the Dow is going to pull back a little bit, come back in and do an immediate retest, regen, at least on this bar, and potentially into these others that it broke. That's the listed issues. Now that's the ones that were struggling the most today. If we look at the other guys, what do? They spike up. They're going back to try to test their high volume highs. That's the NASDAQ and the NDX. And so, when I say tomorrow probably a little pullback, you got the same thing here on the NDX. All I'm basing that on is in the Dow, because everything else is pushing higher. You've got a retest regen going on here at this point with the Russell. So if we draw that in, and actually let me get the right color here so we can see it. If you draw it in, it's from there to there, right? And so it's going to try to do a full retest regen. It's spiked up 1% today. That test is up in that area. I expect it's probably, like everything else, it's probably going to get a little pullback tomorrow and then try to get up there on the next move. That, across the indexes, that's what they look like. So there's really, maybe a little pause tomorrow, a little pullback, but I suspect you're going to see strength in the morning. That strength in the morning, maybe a little pullback in the afternoon. Why do I say strength in the morning? Well, because if I look overseas, looks to me like Europe is going to trade higher. So let's pop those guys up. If we come look at France first, here's France. Comes down, leaves a long tail, no volume. In other words, they trade back into the high volume low, right? So, check this out now. I mean, this is This is the kind of test that we were, at the top of the show, I was saying you set the test, you look, you observe, you see what they do. You're coming into this high volume low. You get into it, right? Well, what's there? That's how many sellers were there last time. How many you got this time? They don't want to sell this thing down here. Well, if you're not going to sell it, what are you going to do? You're going to go up and try to test the other side. So then you ask yourself, okay, where is the other side? Well, there's 2 or 3 things you can look at. You've got these big breakdown bars. You got another one here, right? Those are both important. You've also got this retest, regenerate bearish, but it's already gotten over that. So where's the next level of significance? Well, it's the top of this bar, this retest regen zone, and that one. And so this area here is probably the area it's going to fail into. It's going to try to get up into that, and it's going to fail, more than likely. And that's because that's where all the volumes, that's where the first test of that swing point low is, and it's more than 6 bars. So usually you only get into the bottom of that area. And so a spike up into there probably sets up the next failure and some sort of a pullback. And what does all of this mean? Well, it's just a big range. It's the same thing we talked about when it started making the range. It's the same thing it's doing right now. You just have to realize it's in a range trade. There's nothing wrong with that. And as long as it wants to sit in the range, you need to be smart enough to buy the bottom of the range and sell the top. I mean, that's what a range trade is. And so that is the CAX looks to me like it's going to try to push up. And that's despite Greece, that's despite everything. It looks like it's going to go up there. GDAX, the DAX, the German DAX. Okay, so what is it doing? Swing point low, that low, the number on it is 116.19. You back into it. Actually, you didn't quite get back into it. You're almost back into it. You've already been into it once. So far that has held. Now, where's the bar of significance? It's this bar, right? That's where the volume is, which is the overlap of these two. So that looks to me like it's going to try to get into that bar. Now, the fact that it came into it already twice, and it did it within 6 bars, and you're coming back up for a 3rd time, says that you can get deeper. So it may trade all the way back up to here. And when I say may, I'm kind of thinking right here, because that's where the breakdown bar's top is, where all the volume is, and the high of the low, which is the bearish retest regen. So it looks to me like the German DAX, as the CAX goes up to test its area that we just talked about, the DAX is going to try to test this high, 11,885, and this number over here, 11,849, so about the 11,850 mark. Looks to be where this one's going to try to go. So German market, French market, they're going to try to push up. That's going to put some power, some underlying bid to the American markets, and probably we'll see those trade higher tomorrow. We may actually just hang higher tomorrow in the U.S. markets, and then as these finish off their moves, then all of them pull back together, because right now the U.S. market is totally tied to the DAX and the CAX. Let's go look at Asia. Asia is actually doing the opposite. Asia is trying to pull back. So you got the consolidation here, but this was such a powerful move up, nobody wants to sell. They will, and you'll probably get a widening of this range at some point. But right now, still hanging up there. That's the Hong Kong market. Let's look at the, where is it at? Shanghai. And Shanghai is slowly rolling back over, and it's going to come back down and try to test back into this area. Now, if it holds this green area that you see, which is the anchored support zone, and that bottom is, looks like about 4,300. If it holds at 4,300, then you have quote-unquote a higher low, right, which everybody loves to use that as their means of knowing trend transition and direction. And so they'll key on that, and they'll say, okay, that's it, right? We're going to go back up again, and they'll try to buy it. So assuming it comes into this area and holds, I wouldn't be surprised to see the buyers show up right about there. and start pushing this thing back up. So that's the hang. No, it's not the Hang Seng, but the Shanghai market. That's the world markets. Now, what else is going on? Well, over in the ox markets, when we talk about the ox markets, we're talking about the currencies, the golds, the silvers, all those guys. And I'm bringing up the FXE to start with. Now, a lot of folks, starting to think, okay, this thing's going to just go to the moon again. Not so fast, right? You get up into these big bars. That's, you got a nice big push. You got volume on this push, nice short covering, all that business. That's all good. But, this is on a weekly now. But really, focus on the test. What does the test look like? The volume on this bar, right? This volume bar. Look at the test of it. Does it get into it? Yeah, it does. Does it have more volume? No, it doesn't. Okay, it's got less volume. Okay, that's the first thing. But it got into this bar, right? Smack dab into it. Didn't quite get to the top. Came up, got over the swing point high, changed trend, and said, okay, we're sideways trend now on this time frame. Now what is it going to do? It's probably going to pull right back down in here, right, and try to regen higher again. It's going to try to push back higher after it retraces. So I'm looking for it to trade back into about the 107 number, right, and continue this sideways trend, because that's what's happening right now. This can go on for 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, a year, right? Because you just had a huge downdraft in this, right? If you want to check out this downdraft, look at the monthly. Look at how far this came. Came off of 139 down to $1. That's a huge percentage on a currency in a short period of time. We're talking 7 months. That's gonna build out a trend, right? A sideways range, and then eventually it's going to try to continue what it started. You got volume at the bottom. It's going to try to continue it, but it's going to take a while. And when I say build out a range, where's that range? Well, here on this time frame, the monthly, it could come all the way back up to this area. So you could get it back up in the 118, 119 area. You got as high as 112 already, 113. So it could go another $5, $6. I mean, that's not out of the question. That would just be about halfway down, halfway back up. I don't know that it's going to get there. I'm just saying it could do that and it wouldn't be anything wrong with it. So expect a range. Expect this to pull out a range, right, and trade in a range. If we look at the other big piece, it's the Japanese yen. Pull it over and you see the same sort of thing. What did it do when it made its first trip down? Now just think about the euro now and look at the yen. Goes down, big draft, right, to the downside. And then this thing went sideways. So this low was on May 1st, 2013. It finally broke it September 2014. So that's like, what, 17 months sideways? That can happen in the euro. Okay, so you have to realize we're talking long-term stuff here. Yen, at this point, building out another range. In other words, if I bring this back over here, what is it doing? You had a range here, you got a range there, you're building out another one down here now. Okay? If these are going to go lower, then what's going to happen to the dollar? Well, the dollar is going to go higher, and that's going to be a problem for U.S. markets when it eventually does it. Right now, it looks pretty pessimistic on the daily. Well, get off the daily and look at the weekly. Does it look as pessimistic? No, not really. It's coming into this bar. It's trying to get into it, right? It's kind of got these ranges set up. And, if you want to draw them that way, you're going to try to bounce back up into the top of this bar. That's where it's going to try to get to. That would correspond with what we were just talking about with the euro and having the yen come back down to the bottom of its range again. Is that going to put pressure on the markets? Nah, not unless it goes straight up, right? And really, freaks people out. More than likely, it's not going to matter. Bonds. Let's look at bonds right quick. If we look at the bonds, now the bonds had also sold off. looked like death warmed over as well. If we look at it in on the weekly, it was a different story, and I pointed this out last night in that the bonds had just came into this bar on the weekly, right? And had less volume. Yeah, it was a nice build-up in volume, but this was less volume. So you spike into it, reverse, you've got more volume on this bar than the bar prior. That says we can probably come back down here, and probably will. And matter of fact, we're already back down there. And it also says hammer reversal, it should not trade under that low, right? Should not trade under that low if that's really a hammer. So what does that mean if we go back now to the daily chart, pull it up again? That says that this pullback today, which came on light volume, probably is going to find support and buyers here very quickly and try to reverse and come back up and do what? Test this retest regen bearish right here and see if it can regenerate lower. Now recognize that would be the second test. That means the probabilities are less that it's going to hold and regenerate lower. If the bonds start to shoot up, if the dollar starts to shoot up, right, yeah, maybe together they might put a little pressure on equities, but I think right now what's the big deal? The big deal is going to be, you know, the euro putting more pressure on the European stocks, which in conjunction will put pressure on our stocks. But that hasn't happened quite yet. All right, we just finally got the first day of the pullback on the euro. Has to extend, has to put a little fear into them. That's where the markets are. What I expect tomorrow, as I said up front, I expect we're going to see some push in the morning. Maybe by tomorrow afternoon, or certainly by Wednesday, probably see some of that come back. And if I remember right, I think you got the Fed minutes coming out. You go to the resources here and grab the calendar. I think the minutes come out on Wednesday, if I remember right. Yeah, FOMC minutes. So if we haven't pulled back by then, this may be the catalyst. I also wanted to show you one last thing before I go, and that is if you look here, you know, this market still hasn't broken down. I mean, you don't see, you know, it was on the verge again. It's been on the verge so many times that, you know, it's like a cat with 20 lives versus 9. You got utilities down, you had the IWM down. Outside of that, nothing wanted to give it up. Yeah, there's some sideways here, but they just wouldn't give it up. Now they're going to go back up and they're going to try to go to the top side and turn some of these back to bullish. If you look longer term, right, intermediate term time frame, they're bullish on the indexes. They're almost universally bullish here. And if you go out to the long term time frame, it ain't nothing but bullish. You know, other than energy, right, straight across the board. Still a bull market, folks. Have yourself a great night. I'll see you next time. Take care. I'm LA. This is and it was your daily NeoTA wrap. See you tomorrow. Good night.